Mitch Marner's agent Darren Ferris dropped a bomb on TSN radio indicating that the Mitch Marner offer sheet that many expected actually did happen. He just chose not to sign it. We'll get into all the details and discuss the offer sheets coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned off the top, we have some very interesting information out of Darren Ferris, the agent for Mitch Marner, who was on TSN radio discussing the contract negotiation process and everything that went into getting this deal done between the Toronto Maple Leafs and Mitch Marner. Of course, there's been lots of talk, lots of speculation, really for a significant period of time. Of course, Mitch Marner was eligible to sign a new contract, right back to the beginning of last year and before that, as he was entering the final year of his entry-level contract. Of course, Kyle Dubas made it known it was priority number one to get him signed by July 1st. And of course, the deadline kept moving. Then it was by training camp before the season. Of course, he only ended up missing a very small percentage here of training camp. But now that it's all over with, Darren Ferris is kind of doing some media, and Mitch Marner's even talking about it a little bit as well. And to be honest, a little bit of it comes across to me as a little bit of damage control. I know that Mitch Marner kind of indicated even before when the deal was first signed that he wasn't real pleased about all the talk going on through social media, especially where his family was kind of drug into it a lot. He was kind of disappointed. Kind of felt like Leaf fans were turning against him a bit, and this kind of feels a little bit like they're trying to do some damage control here. But either way, the big bombshell out of this radio interview was the fact that the Mitch Marner offer sheet that many speculated and some people claim to have sources saying was going to happen actually did happen. It just never became public because he never chose to sign it. Obviously, we've talked about that many times over when it comes to offer sheets. An RFA can receive one, but if he doesn't sign it, it's really completely useless and it's going to go nowheres. But unless a team presents it, they won't know if they really have an opportunity to sign him or not. Of course, they can discuss it with the agent, sometimes even with the player, but either way, until he decides what he wants to do, ultimately, if they don't get signed, they don't become public and nobody really knows unless something like this goes down with a little bit of a, media bomb, if you will. But if the fact that he actually was offer sheeted not once, but twice, certainly doesn't come at a big surprise. Just goes to show that a lot of the talk and a lot of the speculation that was happening over the summer, there was probably more to it than many of us actually thought in the end here, since a lot of it never really became public or appeared to have happened. But he did indicate in the interview as well that Kyle Dubas was well aware of one of them, because the team actually talked to Kyle Dubas and informed them of their intentions. They may have even discussed trade to see if they would bite on that rather than have to go down this road as well, instead of giving up a big package of draft picks to attempt to acquire him. But so all he said was he was aware of one of them. The other one, the team may not have talked to them in Marner's camp, may not have even brought it to their attention. But ultimately, like I said, he was not signing the offer sheet, so therefore it never became public at the time. Now, of course, the first thing on many people's minds is, well, who could it be? What teams would have actually offer sheeted Mitch Marner? Well, Matthew Barnaby, of course, former player, now member of the media, who works for SiriusXM Radio, has his podcast, amongst other things. Certainly a pretty well-connected individual. He posted this on Twitter earlier, indicating that from what he was told a while ago, the two offer sheets for Mitch Marner were Minnesota and Columbus, but ultimately he wanted to be a Leaf, therefore he never signed it. So Minnesota and Columbus both do make sense. Of course, you got to remember with Minnesota, that likely would have taken place prior to Paul Fenton getting fired. His dismissal did happen fairly late into the offseason, and we don't know exactly when these offer sheets were presented either. All we know, it was sometime during the summertime. And now Columbus especially makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Jarmo Kekalainen had a mass exodus out of his roster, losing Sergei Bobrovsky, Artemi Panarin, Matt Duchene, Ryan Dzingel, had all kinds of cap space, and did have a limited amount of draft picks, but the required amount to do a big-time offer sheet. But ultimately, was not successful in having the client sign it and, putting the Leafs in a position where they were forced to match. Now, of course, with Minnesota as well, they certainly need that big-time scorer. It was revealed earlier that a trade almost took place between the Minnesota Wild and the Pittsburgh Penguins, where he almost acquired Phil Kessel in Minnesota. Of course, Jason Zucker was believed to be part of that deal. Of course, Zucker was almost traded by Fenton on a couple of occasions, but clearly before Fenton was dismissed, he certainly did acknowledge the fact that the team needed a big-time scorer, tried to acquire Phil Kessel. vessel, obviously attempted offer sheeting Mitch Marner here. So he certainly was somewhat on the right path, but of course, as we know, he did many other bizarre things, which ultimately led to his dismissal. And I do think the Minnesota Wild ultimately are in a better place with a different direction, and hopefully we see differences here from GM Bill Guerin. But ultimately, with Mitch Marner, Columbus and Minnesota do make a lot of sense. I do think Barnaby is well connected enough to think that what his claims are probably accurate, but of course we don't really know for sure. But at the same time, it just makes it interesting to look back and talk. I know I've seen many Leaf fans out there saying, the Mitch Marner offer sheet never happened ultimately, but actually now we can say it really did. But I did believe all along myself that Mitch Marner ultimately wanted to be a Maple Leaf all along. I really don't think that he had any desire or intentions to want to leave, be traded, be offer sheeted for the sake of actually getting more money elsewhere. It just sometimes that's used as a negotiating tactic, as leverage to try to get the ultimate contract that you're looking for. And as we've seen in the case like Sebastian Aho and his agent with what they did with Montreal, ultimately it does look like they kind of used that process to get the contract they were wanting or close to it out of the Carolina Hurricanes, and just to get it done with and over with early and quickly, get the signing bonuses in there and just be done with it so it didn't drag on forever and he could enjoy his summer and get the training, etc. But Marner didn't want to go down that road. Now, TSN reporter Kristen Shilton, who also covers the Leafs closely, also had a quick chat with Mitch Marner to kind of confirm these claims earlier as well. She posted on Twitter and said, Mitch Marner confirmed what Darren Ferris told First Up 1050 today about receiving offer sheets, but Marner told him immediately he was not interested. Wouldn't reveal if offers were worth more than the Leafs' eventual deal. Just wanted to get something done with Toronto. She also went on to quote Mitch Marner as saying, as soon as Darren mentioned offer sheets, I told him right away, I don't want to explore that option. But I didn't want to miss training camp or any games this season, so that's why I really forced the issue with Kyle to get something done and get me here. Now, the other factor here that Darren Ferris mentioned during his interview was that he really was asked by Michael Landsberg how far apart, what was their biggest gap in terms of dollars, and his response was that they were never really all that far apart on money, that he wouldn't say it was a huge gap. It was really more about term and different options. But of course, what he's saying now, it's he's not going to really reveal a whole lot about the exact negotiations and what kind of terms they were talking about and all that. Ultimately, we're only going to know what was actually signed and agreed to. But I mean, we've also seen NHL insider Elliot Friedman recently state that he really believes that the reason this contract got done when it did is that Mitch Marner got involved and kind of just said, hey, that's enough of everything. I'm tired of it dragging on this long. Let's just really get this done. Get me to training camp. I don't want to miss any time. Ultimately, when he got more involved, the deal seemed to get done. I mean, obviously Darren Ferris was doing his job for Mitch, and obviously Marner trusts him to get that done, and he has been his agent for a while. But ultimately, Friedman believes that Marner finally got more involved himself to kind of push the issue to get this done. Because as I also mentioned, he was not only concerned about missing time, but he was kind of concerned about, I think, his image within Toronto fans, how much his family was being discussed on social media as well, and just wanted it all over with and done. But ultimately, I think it's fair to say that all of us who said Mitch Marner wanted to be a Leaf all along were definitely right. It totally makes sense for him to stay in Toronto. It's his hometown. Gets all kinds of endorsement deals. He's got some great players that he's playing with on his forward line. So why wouldn't he want to stay there? I just think at the end of the day, it's all about him being treated fairly, getting what he felt to be a fair deal. And he was also asked too with Darren Ferris about a fair deal that they used his teammates as more comparables than anybody else around the league. And he did acknowledge the fact that he did, that ultimately when his negotiations, he feels that some of these players should be looking at their teams more than just around the league and saying, okay, kind of, where do I fall here in the pecking order? And if I do just as much work and I'm just as productive as these guys, why shouldn't I be paid appropriately? But ultimately, the big story of the day is that the Mitch Marner offer sheets did indeed happen. So we don't have confirmation on who it was, but according to Matthew Barnaby, he was told it was Minnesota and Columbus. Just some interesting things to look back on and see how this process actually all went here. But at the end of the day, Mitch Marner is a Leaf. He will be for at least 6 more years, and I do believe that was what he wanted all along. So of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and comments down in the comment section. Do you think Minnesota and Columbus make sense as the two teams who actually did offer sheet Mitch Marner? If not, who else do you think would realistically make sense? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.